Anyone passing a police barrack with its locked doors and seeing the constables looking out through barred windows will at once realise that no body of men could preserve its morale under such conditions. By summer 1920, isolated rural RIC barracks had been evacuated to larger garrisons, which were heavily fortified and easier to defend. We decided to intensify operations against the British in our area, attacking them in some of their strongholds, the police barracks. It was no longer safe for the peelers to patrol the roads. Tom Barry believed the RIC held the real power behind the British grip on Ireland. Dan Breen believed the RIC to be a pack of deserters, spies and hirelings, the eyes and ears of British intelligence, and as natives of the country they had an intimate knowledge of the people and ferreted out vital information for the army of occupation.
This is the village of Hollyford, a small little village situated in the heart of the hills of Tipperary.
Hollyford Barracks, that was attacked by members of the Tipperary Brigade under the command of Seamus Robinson. He also had Ernie O'Malley involved in this. He was an organiser operating for the IRA all around that part of the country. Also involved in this attack was Sean Treacy, and he was in charge of 15 to 20 men.
This is the village with its police barracks that featured in a big way in the War of Independence during May of 1920.
You were 86 years of age. Yes. You were one of the few survivors.
We couldn't take any orders only from headquarters at the time.
A policy had been sanctioned by GHQ in Dublin to attack the military or to attack the RIC barracks. Basically this would mean that the RIC would withdraw from the smaller towns and villages, leaving them concentrated in maybe one of the big towns, but then leaving the smaller towns and villages in the control of the IRA. So you can understand the policy or the reason for this policy.
The first action was burning RIC barracks here and there through the country. And the purpose was is to say if they were in the barracks, to take their guns, you know, and use those guns. We weren't too plentiful of guns at the time. You had to have to shoot a soldier or policeman to get a gun, as to say. We were getting, maybe through friends from England or other places, guns, you know. And organisation was kind of watertight. And if anyone was wounded, you didn't leave him. You took him with you, no matter what the consequence.
Well, were there many RIC men here in Hollyford in those days?
Well, there'd be about four, a sergeant and 4 men there.
These were provided to the auxiliaries, to the RIC, to the DMP. Lee Enfield short magazine rifle, number 1, Mark III.
We are now looking at the police barracks, where on the night of the 10th and the early hours of the morning of the 11th of May, one of the fiercest barrack attacks in the south of Ireland took place. The barrack, as we're looking at it, has changed little other than the windows. It allowed them to control the view to the straight ahead and to their left and right. It also had much smaller windows then and provided cover as well as the opportunity of viewing what was happening. At that gable end, the attackers placed the ladder and almost beside the window on the left another ladder was placed.
Tig Dwyer's witness statement has said, "I arranged with a tradesman to splice 3 or 4 ladders together to get sufficient height, for the walls were 30 feet in height. I and my section rehearsed the carrying and hoisting of the ladder. We needed to be able to do it quickly and noiselessly against the barrack."
This attack was under the command of Ernie O'Malley, ably assisted by Treacy, Seamus Robinson and local Hollyford man Jim Gorman, who on that particular night showed to Ernie O'Malley and Treacy and the others of his ability as a fighter. O'Gorman was a man who had already fought with the Australian Army in the First World War, and his military training proved to be a major advantage.
Ernie O'Malley has said, "Jim Gorman's eyes shafted as he listened to our plans. Abruptly, he said, 'You might as well try to shift the Rock of Cashel with that gelignite, for the inside of the barracks is 6 feet above the outside level.' The alternative was to set fire to the barracks by the use of petrol and paraffin.
There's high ground immediately to the back of the barracks, and the road here leading to our left, where you can see first of all as you move along it a little white house there on the right. That was the road leading to the home of the Shanahans, the home of Phil Shanahan, who was then in Dublin, who was actually then a Sinn Féin TD in Dublin. The Shanahan household was actually the munitions factory for this attack, because it was in their house under Treacy's supervision that the bombs and hand grenades used in this barrack attack was made and were actually ferried down this road during the attack.
So the plan was that they were going to set the barracks on fire. Fire was a very powerful weapon used by the IRA, especially for this type of attack.
The main cover for the frontal attacking party was a low stone wall on the road facing the entrance. As the first streaks of light appeared, the men from the 4 Tipperary battalions and the East Limerick Brigade, using only 13 rifles and 20 rounds apiece and a few hand grenades, led by Seamus Robinson and Ernie O'Malley, launched a full frontal attack against Hollyford. The ladders towards the roof 40 feet above them. In the silence, O'Malley conscientiously supervised the outposts placed on each of the roads to hold back enemy reinforcements. Others barricaded the roads, cut telegraph and telephone wires, placed ladders and grumbled at O'Malley's red tape organisation.
92-year-old John Ryan of Rayfada. Well, do you remember the night Hollyford Barracks was attacked?
I do, we got.
What are your memories of that? That was the night of the 10th of May and the morning of the 11th.
Of course, all of us that hadn't rifles were around cutting the roads, you see, where the military couldn't come in on top of them.
Yes.
That was our job.
And you were out actually that night?
Yes, I was, yes.
Can you recall where you were?
Well, over here, about a mile over the road, I'd say.
Near the milestone?
Near the milestone, that's right.
And what was it, digging the road you were, or cutting trees? Or?
Digging the road.
A trench.
A trench.
Well, you saw the very lights and how the...
Oh, it is, yes.
Well, do you remember any of the people, but you weren't close to the barracks afterwards, or to see any of the people involved, such as Seamus Robinson and Treacy and Ernie O'Malley?
Well, of course, there was Paddy Dwyer over here, as you know. There was a brother of my own.
Yes.
Ned was his name. He was in the guards afterwards. There was a good few of the lads around, you know.
Involved in
Yeah.
the
Jim Gorman, I suppose.
Oh, Jim O'Gorman,
Yeah.
Treacy carefully placed his body of 15 to 20 men along the low stone wall. They were to bear the brunt of the fight. Sean, a bit mad on explosives, busily supervised the making of rude grenades in Phil Shanahan's father's house, which was nearby.
So the plan was that Robinson and O'Malley would actually get onto the roof of the RIC barracks in Hollyford. The operation was going to take place on the 10th of May 1920.
In the quiet morning, Robinson and O'Malley, armed with a brace of revolvers, each laden with grenades, detonators and hammers, began to climb towards the roof, soaring 40 feet above them in the dim light. On their backs were tied petrol tins and paraffin-soaked sods, which were slung around their necks.
So how they were going to attack the actual barracks was with the use of grenades, but by also setting fire to the roof. So Robinson and Ernie O'Malley climbing to the roof through ladders, by the use of ladders with turf soaked in paraffin or petrol, carrying it around their necks.
The first ladder was used by Ernie O'Malley and Seamus Robinson to climb up onto the roof to smash the slates. The second ladder was used then to convey sods of turf steeped in petrol, and also cans of petrol to pour in on the roof when the blaze had started.
At the foot of each ladder, 3 men clamped their stockinged feet against the rungs to hold the ladder steady, and remained under the loopholes of the barracks until O'Malley and Robinson reached the roof. O'Malley's ladder rested against the chimney, Robinson's against the chimney. Buckets of petrol and paraffin oil were placed in readiness near the base of the ladders. The men holding the ladders disregarded O'Malley's order to retire to cover, away from the menacing loopholes. A building is prepared for defence by preparing slits or holes through which to fire on the attacker. A dozing sentinel guard and the 11 RIC garrison were rudely awakened by crashing hammers on the roof and tramping feet. A sudden blaze of light lit the sky, accompanied by loud explosions and the stink of petrol.
Giving the cover, giving the protection, was Sean Treacy with his group of men.
The men at the wall had obediently held their fire under Sean Treacy's strict orders, until the wild volleys from the RIC loopholes roared. The men on the roof gripped their revolvers and lay flat on the wrecked and blazing roof. The police beneath exerted themselves to a furious defence. Loopholes exploded with deadly volleys of revolver and rifle fire.
Now, the attack did happen, and once the RIC inside knew that they were being attacked, obviously a gunfight takes place, and Sean Treacy laid down a very strong covering fire at the barracks, concentrating on the loopholes, the little portholes that the RIC were firing out of, and this was very successful in stopping the RIC from either attacking O'Malley and Robinson, who were on the roof, and also limiting their movements.
Hand grenades detonated. Rockets and virgulites shot skywards. The besieged barracks were alerting nearby police and military garrisons to come to their aid with reinforcements. A heavy fusillade burst from the small lean-to building directed against the men on the barracks' flaming roof. Ernie O'Malley and Seamus Robinson were now joined by Jim Gorman, an Irish-Australian World War I veteran. This crack shooter helped the men on the roof redouble their efforts with buckets of petrol. The roof slates were burning hot. The wind blew, reeking smoke and flames into their faces. O'Malley kept up a relentless spattering of revolver fire in reply to the police in the lean-to. Robinson and O'Gorman tirelessly climbed the ladders, hauling up buckets of oil and petrol to feed the blaze. Sean Treacy sped backwards and forwards to the neighbouring house to bring up more explosives. Just as Seamus Robinson ascended the ladder with yet another bucket of petrol, a hand grenade slipped from O'Malley's hand. The deadly weapon hurtled past Robinson's head, bursting into a deafening explosion as it hit the ground. Robinson held his position on the ladder grimly, gritting his teeth. He began the ascent again to rejoin O'Malley. Hurrying along the river, flowing beside the barrack, an egg bomb thrown from the barrack rolled along the ground toward him. Dashing forward, he seized the bomb and hurtled it back against the RIC building.
Because of the design of the barrack, which has a lean-to at the back, the police, when were able to retreat to this lean-to.
Hollyford was now a blazing ruin. The police retreated to the lean-to and defied all attempts to dislodge them. Sustained rifle and revolver shots blazed towards the men. Reinforcements would soon be here.
John Ryan Jar is well known in GA circles in West Tipperary.
It was in 1920, and I can assure you, it was very lively around that time. You had loads of soldiers travelling day and night.
Seamus Robinson, in contravention of Sean Treacy and Ernie O'Malley's arguments, ordered the men to disperse. Seamus Robinson and Ernie O'Malley were both wounded and scorched. Eyelids, eyebrows and hair were singed and blackened. Sean Treacy had been wounded by bomb splinters. Ernie O'Malley has said, "My clothes took fire and my hands were so burned I had little grip in them." Seamus had no eyebrows. His lips were also burnt. Neither of us could speak properly. Sean Treacy chuckled as he looked from one of us to the other. "You're not very inflammable, either of you," he said, as he tied a bandage round my blistered neck. The attackers broke up into small parties and melted quietly away from the blazing Hollyford barracks, accompanied by sporadic police gunshots. In the afternoon, British forces who came to Hollyford evacuated the RIC, and men from the local company then demolished what was remained of the barrack. The withdrawal of the RIC from Hollyford was a big advantage to us, for it gave us a great stretch of open country without any enemy post in it. Later, Phil Shanahan, when reading an account of the events in the local daily paper,
remarked that he wasn't going to talk to Sean Treacy again because he burnt the only decent house in the village of Hollyford.
Arrangements for the attack on Drangan RIC barracks were made at George Hayden's Parsons Hill. Hayden was the 7th Battalion's expert on explosives.
Now, Sean Treacy was in command of this operation with Tom Donovan, but again you have Seamus Robinson and Ernie O'Malley being involved as well.
Sean Treacy decided the raid would take place on Thursday, Corpus Christi, and the polling day for the local government elections, because less notice would be taken of strangers in the area. Sean Treacy and Commandant Tom O'Donovan were in charge. 4 crossroads, thoroughly held by barricades, could command all the enemy approaches to the village during the hours of darkness. Danger lay in the ring of RIC posts. Killinall, Ballingarry, Mullinahone and Fethard, which were no more than 7 miles away. Their garrisons had been amplified by the hardened World War I veterans, the Black and Tans.
Michael, Maroney were here outside Drangan Barracks, the barracks which your uncle was involved in the planning the attack on and in the actual attack itself. Possibly the biggest number of volunteers up to then involved in any engagement were involved here in Drangan.
You hear of people from all over the country who were involved. I believe that there weren't a big number of the local men involved, though there was a strong battalion in the area, and I'm told that the reason for this was that the IRA didn't use their local men in local attacks. The local men from Drangan would have been used in attacks outside of Drangan, and people would have been brought into Drangan to take part in this attack. Ned Grogan from Cashel was another man who cycled out from Cashel to take part in the attack.
Edward Haley, Vice Commandant of the 7th Battalion Kilkenny Brigade, in his witness statement has said, "I and my men blocked the Jamestown Mullinahone Road till daybreak. We had earlier commandeered cross-cut saws and hatchets and felled trees at various points along the road."
Well, you had the roads blocked off in...
Oh, we had. Oh, those trees down all over the country.
By 11:30, the barracks was completely surrounded. Patrols on foot and bicycles moved around, keeping contact with outposts on either flank.
And the plan was the same, that you get volunteers onto the roof, break through the roof, pour in the petrol or the paraffin to start the fire.
This was to be used to throw inflammatory liquid a considerable distance. The success of the attack depended on the pump's performance. Sean Treacy also showed his mud bombs. The grenades were made with a dauby yellow clay which would stick to a sloping surface. This clay was wrapped around a half stick of gelignite with a detonator and fuse.
I'm here in Springfield, Ballingarry with John McGrath. John was a captain of the old IRA and was one of the men who took part in the Drangan Barrack attack.
Then we had explosives. They were taken in a raid previous to that, somewhere around, we said Drangan area. Gelignite, you know, and all that. I think we supplied some gelignite too. And we made those mud bombs.
Yes.
Short stick of gelignite about that length, and wrap yellow clay around it, and lob it up on the roof, and I stick to the roof and drive slates in all directions. So that was that.
Slates could then be blown from a roof. Grenades could then be lobbed, and liquid or flaming paraffin could be thrust directly into a room. Sean Treacy had outlined his plan to Ernie O'Malley and Seamus Robinson. A hole was to be burst with hammers through the roof of a small one-storey house which adjoined Drangan Barracks. The hose pipe from the pump would snake upwards and curve above the barracks roof and squirt a mixture of petrol and paraffin. The roof would be set on fire. Suddenly, the dogs of the village began to howl.
I think we arrived about 8 o'clock. We'd say approximately 8 o'clock.
But the element of surprise was taken from the attackers from the IRA, because unknown to them, a patrol of RAC accompanied by Black and Tan, they came out of the barracks and they came upon the volunteers who were on their way to attack the barracks. So the volunteers tried to arrest them, and shots were fired, and this then alerted the RAC inside the barracks that something was happening.
We went down to a house at the road end of the village that would take you on to Tonine. But we made that a kind of headquarters. And there was a lane then at the back of Drangan. You might know that lane there.
I do, yes.
Going in a line with the village street with 2 policemen a policeman came up to me. He was coming up, and I held him up. He was armed. We took the arms off him and let him up. He remained a prisoner below in that place the whole night.
Yes.
They all chatting together.
You actually held him up?
Yes, we did, yeah. He walked into us, you know.
Yes.
He was prepared for it. He said, don't fire, he had his hand up and all that. That was that.
Ned Riley, Bill Dwyer and Ernie O'Malley went to find a position in front of the barracks. Sean Treacy would provide covering fire. They carried a bucket of the yellow clay to help sling mud bombs onto the front of the barracks roof. They had jumpers and picks to loophole the wall. Quietly, the men took off their boots and refrained from talking while working on the wall.
Now, it didn't stop the attack on the barracks. The volunteers opened fire. There is a gunfight.
Volley after volley came from the sandbagged and loophole windows. Sean Treacy dashed from post to post to see his men were in position. Edward Ayland, OC of the 7th Battalion Kilkenny Brigade, has said in his witness statement, "When we reached Drangan village, a guide conducted us to the rear of the barracks, where we took up a position behind a small hedge and opened fire on the barracks. We drew heavy fire from the barracks on us, including machine gun fire." Ernie O'Malley began to fire his revolver. Barbed wire cut his ear and left cheek. Ty Dwyer was on the ground wounded. One of our men was using a Martini Enfield rifle. This got jammed. The guide cut a piece of bull wire from a fence to make a ramrod to get the fired round from the breech. But, in trying to get the wire, he got shot through the ribs.
But other volunteers managed to actually get onto the roof and pour the paraffin into the breach that had been made.
Ned Riley and Ernie O'Malley went to find Sean Treacy, who was on the roof of the one-storey house. A rapid tat-tat from Treacy's Peter the Painter and Jack the Master's Parabellum prevented a constable firing from the slit to return fire.
The next weapon we'll look at is the POA, German. It's also called a Luger or a Parabellum. In fact, in most documents, when you're talking about the Irish Revolutionary period, whenever you see them refer to the weapon Parabellum, this is what they're talking about.
The barracks roof was smashed with fast sledge blows. The snaky end of the long tube was pulled upwards through the slate holes. From the cover of the upper half of the barracks gable, Sean Treacy flung his mud bombs. The grenade's sharp cracks were followed by whistling slate fragments. Fluid from the hose spread over a large surface. Flaming turf and oily waste was flung upwards. The dripping paraffin blazed. More grenades were pelted into roof holes. The RIC garrison retired further. The police retaliated by throwing grenades from the remote part of the upper story. Fragments from the bursting grenades endangered the men on the roof. The men in the small house were also in danger. The floor was wet with fluid being poured into wooden barrels amid a collection of paraffin, petrol and improvised grenades. The small electric lamps dimmed, but the men continued working in the dark. "Look out below! A bomb!" O'Malley ordered. "Throw yourselves down!" He counted to 10, but no explosion came. The gelignite was faulty. Sean Treacy, Riley commented, Lucky for us. The countryside was ablaze as the besieged garrison sent up dozens of very lights. Ammunition began to explode inside the barrack.
And we were afraid the military would come out, because when the very light would go up, it would burst, and a fierce, brilliant light all over the whole place then, you know.
The pump failed a couple of times. The burning took longer than expected. The men feared relief would come with the dawn to the besieged RIC. Two of us, Ruan and I, kept up the fire on the barracks till daybreak, and in no time the barracks was aflame, but we continued to fire on it until the police surrendered.
But the RSC had really didn't have a choice in the matter here, because the fire did take hold, and they hung out a flag, a white flag of surrender, and they were given the chance to surrender. Their lives would be spared, and they just had to surrender their weapons.
Suddenly the police hoisted a white flag, a shirt tied to a rifle. Ernie O'Malley demanded, "Do you want to surrender?" The faint reply came, "Yes, we want to surrender." O'Malley ordered them, "Throw out your rifles and small arms at once." Ernie O'Malley assured them they would be safe, but urged them to hurry up. He was concerned that the fire would get to the supplies of arms inside, and good rifle food was badly needed.
So they held out until about 6 o'clock, there were two black and tans. So the next thing we saw happening was they shoved out a rag through the top window, cylinder.
Oh, yes.
So they came out anyway with their hands up, and we disarmed them.
A tremendous clatter sounded while the RIC flung their weapons out with as much force as they could muster, so that the maximum damage would be done to the weapons, leaving the unusable. Seamus Robinson and Sean Treacy ordered their names to be taken. They were released with a stern warning not to overstep their mark.
The two of them set off for Kilnoy on the state road.
Yes.
So that was the finish of it.
I see.
They marched away down the village road without looking back. The men rushed into the barrack to salvage what arms and ammunition they could before the fire swept through the upper stories. Ned Riley and Ernie O'Malley dragged out boxes and equipment while the ceiling blazed above them.
But the fire quickly spread, and then it reached ammunition, and so bullets were exploding in the fire.
And ammunition burst in a deafening cascade of sound. As they groped in the smoke, the fiery ceiling caved in. Blazing fragments clung to their backs and crackled in their hair. A burning beam caught Ernie O'Malley. He was rolled on the ground until his smouldering clothes were smothered. Rifles were examined to find if bolts had been damaged or sights injured. Men counted out ammunition and small arms.
Did you take the ammunition and guns out of it? Or?
Oh, we took the whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah. We had a police rifle. We used that for training purposes afterwards. I had it for a while myself. You know those carabines, they have about that thing.
This is a #1 Mark I Lee Enfield carbine in the RIC pattern, and it is, as you can see, shorter than a rifle and is much easier to carry.
A sudden laugh broke the tense mood. "Now lads, listen to this, will you?" A letter to the sergeant had been signed, "Your little lump of love." The men sat down in delight. The little fat peeler and his little lump of love, shouted one man to another.
But the funny thing about that little road at the back of the village, going down along, the sergeant that held me up, or I held him up, he was above him in Erleshill Barracks, stationed one time. But he never knew me.
Yes.
He never knew.
By God.
Sean Treacy, Ernie O'Malley and Seamus Robinson said goodbye to Tommy O'Donovan and his 7th Battalion who had fought so successfully.
Well, did you come in contact with Sean Treacy or Ernie O'Malley or those people that night?
Oh, I did. Treacy was worst man there, sure. He was a dangerous man.
Yes.
He stayed in this area several times.
Did he?
He did, yeah. He did.
And Tom Donovan was involved?
Tom Donovan.
You knew Tom, of course?
Oh, I did, of course. I wouldn't. He was very hot-headed.
Was he?
Right. But very dedicated to the thing, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. Treacy was a dedicated man.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Was he a very serious fellow?
Very serious.
Yeah.
Well, could take a joke, of course, too, but very serious, very dedicated to his work all the time. Right.
The fight had lasted 7 hours, and the barrack was a burning shell as the attacking party dispersed over the countryside.
So the attack on Drangan Barracks was a huge success, but the volunteers couldn't hang around because Veery lights had been sent up very soon after the opening gunshots. So reinforcements were coming, so the IRA had to get out quickly, which they did, and the aftermath of it was that the barracks just was completely destroyed.
We all disappeared and this went off to in our own directions. Yeah.
Well, was the barrack on fire at that
time?
time?
It was blazing. The petrol had done the work.
The famous police barracks at Rearcross, which was attacked by the Irish Republican Army on the night of the 11th and the morning of the 12th of July 1920.
So it's again this policy of attacking the RC barracks to get the RC to withdraw from the smaller towns into the bigger towns, leaving the IRA in control of those areas.
Paddy Lacken came to Hollyford and contacted Jim O'Gorman and Patrick O'Dwyer, who promised him every assistance. Patrick got in touch with Sean Treacy, Dan Breen, Seamus Robinson and Tygo Dwyer. All were in favour of carrying out the attack. Dan Breen's book, My Fight for Irish Freedom, has stated, one evening early in July 1920, word reached us that Paddy Ryan Lacken, captain of the Knockfune Company, would welcome our help in an attack he had planned to make on Rearcross RIC Barracks. But a dispatch was sent ordering the men to return to their brigade area. The maverick Lacken had not troubled to get brigade sanction for his job.
Well, the attack on the barracks at Rearcross, do you remember?
I do. We blocked the road that night back up here. A Saturday night, and sure it didn't come off at all. Patsy Murphy now, he brought Duffershire fellas with a horse and sidecar. I met him on the road. It was Saturday evening, and the headman in Aina put it off. He hadn't word got in time.
The attack was abandoned. The RIC in this barrack had helped to burn Rearcross Creamery, the first of 4 cooperative buildings in Ireland to be destroyed. The British cabinet thought it would turn the people against the IRA, but the people's loyalty was not to be breached. Instead, there was a boycott where the people did not talk or serve or aid the RIC. Ernie O'Malley, unlike the others, was answerable only to GHQ, so he assumed control. Paddy Lacken should have gotten sanctioned, but O'Malley decided that the attack was back on as the men and materials had been mobilised.
Ernie O'Malley was in charge of this attack, but also involved were Sean Treacy, Dan Breen, Seamus Robinson, he'd members of the Mid and South Tipperary Brigades, and some of the 5th and 6th Battalions.
And dinner came off the night after Sunday night.
Oh.
They burned the barracks that night, Sunday night.
Several roads had been blocked by cut trees and boulders. A select party of 40 men were mobilised to Rearcross. Ernie O'Malley says in his book, Raids and Rallies, "We had long lengths of rope, space for the men to grip, for the night was as black as a Kerry cow. We were laden with buckets, petrol tins, paraffin, heavy bombs, ladders, a 40-gallon barrel, the pump, and our weapons. The wind roared in our faces and lashed the rain until we had to turn sideways and backwards to breathe."
This was indeed one of the most intensive barrack attacks in the 3rd Tipperary Brigade area, because it was 3rd Tipperary Brigade people who were mostly involved here. Jim Gorman of Hollyford, Paddy Dwyer of Hollyford, Sean Treacy, Ernie O'Malley, all the leading figures in the War of Independence in South Tipperary were involved in this attack.
The actual plan was, like previously, to access the roof of the RIC barracks, and how they were going to access the roof this time was actually through a shop called Flannery's that was right beside the barracks there.
Flannery's pub, general hardware shop, and the barracks was a long 2-storied building under the same roof. All the windows were steel plated and loopholed. There was wire mesh protection against grenades. The garden was covered by a mass of barbed wire.
They had steel shutters inside the barrack window and barbed wire exactly where Raymond Shanahan is now.
The actual plan was, like previously, to access the roof of the RIC barracks, and how they were going to access the roof this time was actually through a shop called Flannery's that was right beside the barracks there.
Patrick Kinane has stated in his witness statement, "The strength of the RIC garrison in Rearcross was 18 to 20 men. Jim Stapleton, Jack Fahey, Jim O'Gorman and I entered Flannery's house through a low back window near midnight. We roused the people from their beds and told them what we were about to do. In the top room next to the barracks, we filled the barrel with paraffin oil. There was plenty of it in Flannery's shop. Jim O'Gorman climbed through a trapdoor in the ceiling of this room. Using a hammer, he broke a hole in the slates as near as possible to the barrack roof. Reaching an arm out through the hole, he fired 5 or 6 shots rapidly with his revolver through the slates, but also to scare any RIC who might be upstairs.
They opened fire. They let off a number of shots because there could be RIC men in that space, so to offer some protection there. Now, while all this was going on, you had Dan Breen, Sean Treacy and so on the outside, guarding the perimeter of the barracks.
Paddy Kinane, Tom Gleeson, Jim Stapleton.
You knew Paddy Kinane, Tom Gleeson and Jim Stapleton?
I did. Well, was often in the church at meetings that time, you know.
Patrick Kinane has stated in his witness statement, "We worked in the knowledge that we were perfectly safe. If the police made a sortie out of the house to attack us in Flannery's, they would be met with a volley of fire from a party of riflemen under Paddy O'Dwyer of Hollyford. They covered the entrance to the barracks from a position behind the wall of the chapel yard." Patrick O'Dwyer's witness statement has said, "To divert the attention of the police from the roof, our instruction was to fire only an occasional shot at the door and windows of the barrack. One of my difficulties that night was to see that this order was carried out. The 4 boys were inclined to blaze away for all they were worth. Only a few shots had been fired when the sergeant and 2 constables made their appearance at the door. He had a rifle in his hand, and as he looked in our direction, one of my men took aim and fired. We saw him throw up his hands and collapse. He was dragged into the door by some of his colleagues."
Standing across from us is Raymond Shanahan of Hollyford, standing in the exact position that the sergeant of the RIC stood as he left the barracks to try and dislodge the IRA attackers
Just as he was about to fire on them, Paddy O'Dwyer of Hollyford, from behind where we are standing now, discharged rapid rifle fire, and the RIC sergeant was seen to fall.
Patrick Kieran has said the garrison replied with everything they had: machine guns, rifles, grenades and berry lights. Ernie O'Malley says in his book, Raids and Rallies, "Immediately that we started operations on top, our men outside opened up on the barracks with their rifles to divert the attention of the police from the roof. I held a long hose while Jim O'Gorman pumped away. Spread by cotton waste and paraffin dripping turf, the blaze fought the wind and the rain. I tried to light the fuse of a mud bomb and cursed when foiled by lashing rain. There was nothing for it but to get back under cover of Flannery's roof, to light a couple of cigarettes for use as torches, and to smear some gelignite on the end of the wet fuses so that they might light. Out on the roof again, and when I reached the chimney, I was able to start the fuses from under the shelter of my coat by applying the burning end of a cigarette to the smear of gelignite. Slates began to fly as I flung bomb after bomb, stripping off quickly large areas of the roof within my lobbing range. We ran the hose through the trapdoor and through the hole in the roof. Stapleton and I took turns with the pump. O'Gorman soon had the roof burning. The roof burned for 20 minutes before it caved in, but it did not ignite the centre of the roof. We pumped and drenched it with plenty of paraffin, which Jim O'Gorman set afire by throwing lighted rags and burning sods. But again, a dividing wall prevented the third section igniting. Here, the RIC held out. The pump and hose failed. Dan Breen has said in his book, My Fight for Irish Freedom, that Jim O'Gorman quipped to Ernie O'Malley, "When you hear a bullet, it's all right."
Now, all the IRA were expecting to deal with that night was the RIC, but that night in particular, the weather was really, really bad, so they had to actually contend with wind and rain lashing down. This actually hampered their efforts. The attack went on for hours.
The IRA were somewhat hampered by the lack of rifles.
Dan Breen's book, My Fight for Irish Freedom, has stated, "Sean, Treacy and I went at full speed to Flannery's. The wind directed the flames to Flannery's top story, where there was 200 gallons of paraffin, explosives and incendiaries. Sacks steeped in water were used by Jim Stapleton, Patrick Kieran and Lacken, who extinguished the fire. At the same time, Ernie O'Malley, Ryan and Gorman were doing all in their power to intensify the blaze on the adjoining roof. Firefighting and fire raising were going on side by side. While we were helping in the removal of explosives from the danger zone, heavy thuds sounded next door, followed instantly by loud explosions. Gorman had tossed a 2-gallon tin of petrol through a hole in the roof of the barracks. And Ernie O'Malley followed this up by crashing some of the heavy bombs on top of the garrison.
On the porch of this RIC barracks, as it was then, you can still see the bullet marks, the chippings from the bullets, in the wall of the porch.
Ernie O'Malley says in his book, Raids and Rallies, "The heavy cart box bombs were metal cart boxes filled with gelignite, packed with scrap iron, clasped with bolts and drilled with a hole for a fuse. Jim Gorman turned to me suddenly. 'I'm hit,' he said, holding his arm. 'Do you think it got the bone?' I asked. 'No, it's not bad.' He would not complain of the pain, I knew. I helped him down the manhole we had made in Flannery's roof. I examined the wound and found that the bullet had travelled along his arm from the wrist. I bandaged the entrance wound, and when he had taken a drink, he wanted to return with me to the roof, but I could see he was in pain, and that his wounded arm was useless. You can't use two hands above, but you can be a reserve down here. Dan Breen has said in his book My Fight for Irish Freedom that day was beginning to break. We were getting worried. There was no hope of dislodging the garrison unless we could intensify the blaze. We could not maintain the attack in broad daylight, as our poorly armed outposts would be unable to keep heavy reinforcements at bay. Ernie O'Malley says in his book Raids and Rallies, Sean Treacy got the sudden inspiration of filling Flannery's empty porter and naggin bottles with petrol and hurling them against the roof. They filed the necks so they would smash on impact. Sean Treacy, Dan Breen and Ernie O'Malley stood on the ground and threw the bottles with a rapid swing.
A grenade exploded, wounding Sean Treacy, Dan Breen, Ernie O'Malley and a number of others.
A grenade burst in our midst. I flattened myself against the ground. It burst beside me with a deafening report. Sean Treacy and I ran for Flannery's back door. Another grenade exploded. Blood on my right hand flowed from a deep wound to my shoulder. Flannery gave me a good glass of brandy, said Ernie O'Malley. Patrick O'Dwyer's witness statement has said, by morning, the barrack itself was ablaze. About 9 a.m, the attack was called off. The police had taken shelter in an annex at the rear. The RIC could not have held out much longer, but a signal to withdraw was given as the result of an incorrect reading of a distant signal.
Unfortunately, not all of the roads had been blocked to stop reinforcements getting to help the RIC, the besieged RIC that were there, and word got through that reinforcements were actually on their way, so the volunteers had to pull back.
Dan Breen has said in his book My Fight for Irish Freedom that at 9 o'clock a scout announced, "They're coming, they're coming." The laconic Jim Gorman drawled, "He won't stop till he reaches Nina." The scout had mistaken Jack Meehan's old hearse and funeral party for British reinforcements, and the attack was called off. Our entire column, numbering about 50, withdrew on a pre-arranged route which took us through the village of Hollyford. Sean Treacy, Ned Riley, Ernie O'Malley, Jim Gorman and I brought up the rear. As the boys marched past, four abreast, all the villagers turned out and shouted, "Up Sinn Féin!" Ernie O'Malley exclaimed, "Oh, holy mackerel, do you hear what they're calling us? Bloody Sinn Féiners!"
Of others. The result was they didn't actually capture the position, but enough damage was done to the barracks that the RIC had to withdraw.
The date also coincided with the anniversary of the Battle of Duggan and famous events in the north of Ireland.
Another Cashel man, who was also called Paddy O'Dwyer, but his real name was Paddy Walsh, had taken part in the sniping at Rearcross. Paddy had written the following ballad, The Battle of Ray, which recalls the attack on the barracks in Rearcross. They gathered from valley and highland, from their homes by the rivers and hills, to fight for the freedom of Ireland one night in the heart of the hills. For they were the bravest of soldiers, no cowards or cravers were they, as they marched with their guns on their shoulders to blow up the barracks array. The Constabulary Gazette has printed an editorial which shows the frustration of many of the rank-and-file members of the police force. Why proceed on patrol according to red tape? Why continue to occupy ridiculous little arsenals in sparsely populated districts? Why pursue the old methods, now obviously clumsy and obsolete? The men who shoot the police are very clever. Of this there is no room for doubt. The police were becoming very demoralised.
my big interest is to record as much as possible for posterity, for future generations. And while we have an awful lot of people have gone to their eternal reward, I'm glad to say that even at this late stage, we are doing something in the committee to pass on to future generations history.
My name is Marcus Howard, and I'm the filmmaker of Easter Rising Stories, and I've edited this film together. I met John Hassett when I was making a film on Dan Breen and Sean Treacy with his relations in 2016, and he was helping everybody out. But the one thing that was interesting was he said to me in passing, "I want to do what you do." And I didn't give this much thought. But it was only in 2019 that I actually found out that he was recording the actual people who took part in the 1919 to 21 War of Independence in the 1980s. So in a way, he wanted to be like me, but I wanted to be like him. And as his health was failing, I said to Niamh, it would seem very appropriate to me to try and put something together in tribute both to John Hassett and also for the anniversary of the burning of the barracks. So thank you, John Hassett, and thanks for keeping the flame alive.
We are hopeful that the work will be of some benefit to students of history of a future generation.
All the volunteers, they had to sacrifice their life.
Oh, we had a good company, a good working company here at that time.
You were the captain of the company?
I was captain there for a while, yeah. We had a good loyal fellas. Often Treacy and Hogan stayed around this area. I knew Treacy very well, and John Hogan.
Dan Breen, would you have?
Dan Breen, we had him, well, not so often, Dan. So they're all dead and gone.
Ourselves alone, their battle cry, and freedom rise through that Easter sky. They were the men with the vision, the men with the cause, the men unified their oppressors' laws, the men who traded and changed for guns, born into slavery they were freedom sons. The poet's dream had sparked a flame, a raging fire it soon became, and from the fire of destiny arose a nation proud and free. They were the men with the vision, the men with the cause, the men unified their oppressors' laws, the men who traded and changed for guns, born into slavery they were freedom's sons. 6 counties lay in bondage still, they died great men, was this their will, until we're free and oppression cease, only then great men can sleep in peace. They were